What does it mean to be human? It's more than an existential question. Today, we are far from the beginning of human life or of foreseeable extinction. We've evolved from surviving to living. Our meaning, what had once been to survive the night, had transformed into something far more tribal and complex. We see it in many forms: politics, faith, culture, ethics. In a developed society like ours, those of us lucky enough not to have to worry about the next meal began to contemplate our own cosmic purposes. Survival was our physical purpose, and when no longer in danger, man looks to other dimensions to find meaning. So this brings us to the question, what is the meaning of life? It's a fairly common question, but it doesn't possess a simple answer. Viktor Frankl argued that meaning is found in the day-to-day struggles of mundane existence, that meaning is derived from a compilation of all the things we fill our lives with. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the fathers of existentialism, believed life to be suffering, that part of being human is the curse of contemplation. As the human mind expands, as we are confronted more and more with how vast the universe is, and therefore how small and insignificant we are, our sense of self begins to diminish, and our need for purpose becomes stronger. When we're not in danger, we give our mind permission to expand. When we're not fighting lions or running from wolves, we're able to look up at the sky and wonder, why are the stars the way they are? Why are we the way we are? Why is the universe, in its elephantine vastness and power, deciding to invest and create something as infinitesimal as us? Surely, when we were formed, we were given a purpose, a reason to live, a goal, an aim, anything that would mark our presence in the cosmos. So this leads to the question, where do we find that purpose? That's the great conundrum of the human condition. Meaning, after all, is very vague in its definition, and even more vague when put into the context of actual human lives. We're all so incredibly dissimilar. Everything, from our neural pathways to our fingertips, is different from one person to another. In such a starkly diverse society, how can we possibly create a concise definition for meaning in human life?
Life does have a purpose, and to me personally, I think it's all about enrichment and fulfillment. We chase after opportunities that will fulfill certain voids in our heart and in our soul, and it allows for life to have more complexity and beauty when we go after these experiences and fulfill them. And to each their own. We all have different opinions on certain things, and we all have different interests and hobbies, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're going after. What matters is that you're gaining something from it, that you're growing not only in soul but in your mind and in your heart, and you're doing the best you can to help further society and fight for progress.
Diversity in mankind complicates the idea of universal meaning. When considered in the dimensions of actual human lives, the received meaning of life begins to change. Purpose becomes versatile to the perspective of the beholder, and its perception becomes dependent on the individual. Different schools of thought throughout the centuries have given meaning and interpretation to life in a variety of ways. Natural pantheism holds that caring for nature is man's meaning. Theism believes meaning lies in observing the word and will of a god or gods. Hedonism believes instantaneous pleasure to be man's purpose. However, that brings attention to the conundrum present. Is meaning something we find in daily life, or is it something inherent in all of us?
Do we make meaning, or does meaning make us? It's a sort of chicken and egg scenario. Is meaning something that we find as we go through life? Because if it is, then meaning's something that's shaped by personal experience. Or is it something more inevitable, something that we're born with, that we can't help or avoid?
Innatism, a philosophical notion founded by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, suggests that the mind is born with knowledge, innate ideas and principles, and thereby an inherent sense of purpose and meaning.
Maybe this is the truth behind mankind. We're all hardwired to a certain purpose that we're fated to fulfill. This is the idea of destiny and fate. And if humans are hardwired to a certain purpose, then maybe they're hardwired to certain behaviors too.
The natural state of man is something that has been heavily debated. Some philosophers, like the Genevan theorist Jean-Jacques Rousseau, believed man's character to be naturally good, to have an inclination towards benevolence. Man, according to him, was free, wise, and compassionate in its natural state. Others disagreed. 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed that individuals were in a war of all against all. He believed man to be short-tempered, brutish, prideful, and ultimately destructive. The only thing holding back their savagery were the constructs of civilization and established codes of legal morality.
We've had different people throughout history debate what it is to be human. If man has a natural state, then it must define him, right? If human nature's instinct is towards benignity and altruism, or hostility and selfishness, then it helps to define the purpose or meaning of their lives. If humans are naturally selfless, then any acts of self-indulgence are subconscious rebellion against man's inherent disposition. Should humans be innately self-serving, then any acts of selflessness are desperate fights against the consuming evil of man's intrinsic mentality. So that begs the question, what does it mean to be human? Are we naturally conforming or rebellious? Is it in our nature to be selfish or selfless?
I would definitely say that humans have an inclination towards selfishness just because that's what happens in nature itself. Like throughout our lives, we hear the term survival of the fittest, and oftentimes we just laugh about it, especially in times of COVID, where everyone was just rushing towards stores to get toilet paper. But human beings, like animals, are motivated by greed and the constant need to feel better than some people. If we were selfless, then how come people have nice cars when other people don't have cars at all? Or why do people buy designer clothing when other people don't have any clothing or completely ripped up clothing? Why do we choose to go after higher paying jobs rather than doing stuff that we enjoy more? So the constant like pressure towards greed or just the constant feeling of wanting to have more of anything pushes us towards the selfish nature.
I think that I want to kind of connect it to being like interdependent. I think in general, Western society like tends to be more focused on the individual, they say, or I've heard, right? Like, especially just considering like we live in a capitalist society, right? Where we are. So in a way that can be looked at, or you can be like raised to think more of like individual gains versus what the group is gaining overall, right? And um, that's absolutely what I experience like growing up here. I see that around me, but I also think like depending on how you were raised or maybe like what you've learned through life experiences, that you can have natural inclinations or you can have like learned, so maybe that's not natural, right? Maybe it learned inclinations towards being like more focused on the greater good goals. Now, is that still kind of selfish because you realize that your survival depends on like treating the environment well, or like, what we all gain together if, the roads are safe? I don't know, maybe that's still selfish, but I kind of think I kind of think of it in those terms. Like, yeah, we wouldn't survive if we didn't, put the water in our mouth and, eat the food. Like there is some sort of like um an instinct that kicks in that I think is truly like selfish, but like as far as actions beyond that sort of survival, I'm realizing that for the greater good you have to do certain things. When you think about selfishness, or when you're asking about selfishness, are you asking specifically about like, I'm not going to do this unless you pay me? Or are you thinking about like, I want to contribute to the landfill because I want all the fast fashion I can have because there will be some who will say like the highest we can achieve is selflessness, right? Like that's the ideal. You want to care about others. But there'll be others who will say, oh, if we don't teach people to be selfish, like, they say like, I go back to capitalism again with those like selfish pursuits of creativity. Like if you didn't have that drive to do that, we wouldn't have, beautiful buildings or bridges or, art, because those are selfish acts, and we need people to be selfish. So, it's definitely like debatable on if you're deciding which is better or which is worse. But maybe it's because I'm an extrovert. I know it's my own selfishness. I like to be surrounded by other people. I like to feel like I'm part of a group. I like to feel like I'm lifting others up. That is my preference.
I might be a little bit of a pessimist here, so some people may disagree. But I do think, it's human nature to be selfish. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And selfishness doesn't necessarily mean that it's inherently evil. For example, if I get my sibling a gift, if I get him something, I want him to be happy. That's why I give it to him. But I know that if I can see him happy, it makes me happy. I'm not going to be losing anything to say. I guess money. But other than that, I'm gonna be fulfilled by seeing him happy, seeing my brother happy that I got something. It's not necessarily a bad thing. In the end, it's another way, bringing back the philosophy that I was talking about, benefiting myself and others. I was able to benefit myself by, being happy to see, the person happy as well, that I got them something. So, though, a lot of people do have, I guess, an inclination to be selfish at times, that's not a bad thing, I don't think, because in a lot of ways we can use that inner selfishness to do good for others.
Humans have an inclination to be selfless because if you study any human civilization from the past, we work together. That was how we evolved and moved forward, as we worked together as a community. We built each other. We weren't really divisive. Women and men ultimately worked together to support their communities. And I only think that the way our society is set up today is why we think that we're inherently selfish or we're inherently greedy. But I think we're also very adaptive. And so if our society requires us to be greedy, then we will be greedy. But if we lived in a society that promoted camaraderie and brotherhood and working together and cooperation, then I think that we would be cooperative. But if we live in a society that promotes negative values and exploitative measures to obtain, success or luxury or wealth, then to avoid homelessness, you'd ultimately do whatever you could to, get what you needed in life. But I'm of the understanding that humans are not inherently selfish. We are selfless creatures. Lives in a society that goes against our innate human nature because of capitalism.
Civilized history has existed for more than 6,000 years, for each of the many thousands of cultures, civilizations that would arise. Just as many ideas, concepts, and philosophies would develop to justify their fall. In China, the mandate of heaven bestowed upon the Yellow Emperor granted divine authority to rule over all in the Middle Kingdom. Under the philosophy of Chinese legalism, every individual was a selfish and ruthless sycophant, wholly untrustworthy of moral virtue. Only through the strong guiding hand of the government and bureaucracy can human nature be steered into line for society's benefit. Renaissance humanism, on the other hand, emphasized the infinite potential for greatness existing within man's grasp. Formed and established in the middle of a great intellectual rebirth, the complex philosophy held that the meaning of life was the cultivation of one's and others' greatness or virtue. In searching for virtue, humanism embraced and encouraged the traits of hubris and selfishness amongst its adherents. Human life is so unique so powerful and so intricately crafted that its potential must be recognized and not let go to waste. Emerging from the midst of the great scientific revolution of the 1800s, social Darwinism was established as an extension of biology's survival of the fittest. Applying Darwinian evolutionary tenets to society, social Darwinists held that society existed in constant competition, with an obvious inferiority and superiority amongst all individuals. They held that it was the responsibility of society to nurture strength amongst the population and culture while quashing or improving those deemed inferior. In an era dominated by the rise and continuance of imperialism, social Darwinism would be a driving force for imposing control and atrocities upon other nations and people. In the extreme diversity of our world, can we truly say that one size fits all? Can we really conclude that the mandate of heaven rules supreme over all lands between heaven and earth? Can we proudly proclaim man's infinite potential for greatness, genius, and good while ignoring its potential for evil, ignorance, and cruelty? And can we relegate millions of individuals to positions as inferiors, needing civilization? This is the ultimate paradox of human philosophy. Whether it be from the great tracts of the Silesian plain to the rugged outcroppings of the Tibetan plateau, we are each individuals forged by our environments and surroundings. In the diverse motives and values that make us act, there is not, cannot be, one single true meaning, definition, or philosophy behind the purpose and qualities of man's existence. Yet why do we do it? Why do we, as human beings, seek such an all-encompassing meaning to our lives? Why do we create and form values, beliefs, and systems of thought based on our own observations, without consideration to the human condition as a whole?
Power, justification, recognition. These are the elements that drive the creation of philosophy and our zealous determination to dictate reality as we know it. In a world so expansive, we are particles of dust, floating without an aim in the endless infinity. We are, in fact, very, very, very small in comparison to the great everything else.
So just in case you're feeling a little insignificant today, it's because you are. Just kidding.
Our search for meaning is less an intellectual pursuit of truth and understanding and more a chase for control and power over the unpredictable reality around us. In our struggle against the void, we fabricate and manipulate the events of humanity to fit into the narratives we have created in our minds. We convince our mind that everything from the dancing tumble of knuckle bones to the cascading flurry of a meteor shower is a sign of something greater. A sign that acknowledges us as the sole authority of the universe. In the struggle for importance and meaningful existence, we fabricate and manipulate the events of humanity to fit into the narrative we have created in our minds. We create private, non-existent audiences and put ourselves in the imaginary limelight. We convince ourselves that everything that occurs around us happens because the cosmos wants a reaction. We believe that everything that happens is because the universe is rooting for us or conspiring against us. We believe that no act is independent of our thoughts and feelings. We believe that the ripples we create in the world are bigger than they actually are. We shift and shape these eclectic and contradictory moments of the human condition to indulge movements, ideas, beliefs, and people. Because of our need for power, control, justification, and recognition of who we are and what we do, we seek our own definitive meaning and purpose above all others. We ignore the inconvenient truths in lieu of comfortable falsehoods, and we insulate ourselves in ignorance for fear of realizing such truths. So we engage and participate in selfishness. Man's selfish search for a definitive meaning to trump all others in the cosmos ignores the intricacies of the human experience. It obscures our ability to understand the pains of the individuals around us. It prevents us from hearing the disparate plights, circumstances, and difficulties of the community, those around us. Only by lending them our ears can we truly overcome the philosophical fallacy that is life's universal meaning. And just like the innumerable grains of sand that dot the coastline, there are infinitely many difficulties of equal parts depth, texture, and quality that exist in our daily lives.
I'm going to start by explaining how it was for me in a personal experience. Is that growing up, my life was tough. I had to do everything on my own. I had a lot of expectations, but no support. It was like, yeah, you need to go to college and you need to work and you need to do all this stuff. And, there was no money for college. There was none of this, but it was expected of me. And if I didn't have this, I was kind of like not on a good path or lesser of a person. Right. And I realized that there was a lot of anger around that. And so what happened is that I had to take a look at my anger and where that was coming from. And then I also had to take a look at the view of where I am in my life. And what I've noticed is that during that phase of my life, when I was angry, I was more judgmental on people because I was unhappy myself. Right. So for me, being honest about my feelings, being honest about my anger, allowed, like me learning how to communicate my emotions to people that were important in my life, allowed me to create a dialogue with people where I started to see that it wasn't like, first of all, I wasn't asking for help. Right. And so that's important. And second, like, the people that cared about me didn't understand that they were putting any kind of pressure on me. So I was able to vocalize that. And then we were able to move forward. And I was also, the most powerful thing I was able to do was change my position about something.
And when I was young, I grew up, my father's brother suffered from schizophrenia. And when I think I was 16, he took his own life. And I'm like, gosh, I get emotional even thinking about it because, when you grow up with someone who struggles to care for themselves and needs help, it changes the way you see family, and it changes the way you see other people who have need, right? And so from a young person, like from a young age, right, I saw like the impact of need, right? Of my family needing resources to, help care for him, of, doctors and police officers who would help us when he was like particularly, aggravated and not having an okay time, and the impact on my family. And then going through that loss, even when you're losing someone who's suffering, it changes how you see the people around you.
Okay, so about 2 years ago, man, I can't believe it was 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, I was in a relationship with someone, and their mental health struggles kind of affected mine. I'm not saying like you shouldn't be in a relationship with someone with mental health struggles. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But like there are times where I felt like his mental health struggles were affecting mine, and they were constantly bringing me down. So I made the decision to break up with him, and that really wasn't the hard choice. Actually, it was actually not that hard of a choice. What happened was that the repercussions of that, he ended up hurting himself and almost died. And I started blaming myself and saying, I need to be in this relationship. This is my fault. I should never have done this. I should have never broken up. I should have stayed in the relationship. But the decision of being like, no, this is not my fault. I am going to leave. This is not, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to, I don't need to stay. It's not my obligation to stay with someone because they hurt themselves. That decision was probably the hardest I've ever made, because it not only came with like me being terrified of him hurting himself again, it also came with me having to deal with all the trauma that he put me through the relationship that I didn't really notice. It wasn't, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal to me at the time. I just thought it was like, you know, something normal. But later on, it's still something that I'm dealing with, like the fact that this happened. But I'm so glad that I made the decision to leave and not someone else's, you know, not let someone else's mental health bring me down. Because in the end, I think that you can only reach your hand out so much. In the end, they also have to eventually grab onto you. They can't drag you down. And I think that, like, taking myself away from that situation was the hardest, but probably the best decision I could make.
In 2013, I lost my older brother, one of my older brothers, to suicide. And then in 2018, August of 2018, so this will be like, I don't even know how many years, but I was hospitalized for having an eating disorder. And just like mental health issues has always been something that I've really been battling. I still have a problem with my eating disorder and like depression. It's gotten worse throughout the pandemic, being at home, lack of social interaction. And it's really been hard trying to find a way to feel like myself in an environment where I don't feel like myself. Like, I'm very, very social, love talking, love being around people. School was my safe haven because I was around people all the time and I could hang out with them. I grew up like kind of in a strict household. I wasn't really encouraged to have a social life or have friends, which was really weird because I'm like the complete opposite. Like, I need friends. And so complete transition is 180 from like always being around people, staying after school as long as possible, talking to people, being in debate, being in all these clubs, to being at home and for like 2 weeks straight and never stepping outside. Like, that's how bad it was for me. It was like I would be in the house and wouldn't feel sunlight for 2-3 weeks because I just wouldn't go outside, because what was the point? You know, like, I wouldn't do anything. And it was really, really hard. And I had to find meaning to my life and find a reason for me to keep going. It was really, really hard. It was like, you know, there's so many other people in this world. Why should I have to be here? You know, I can't even put food in my mouth most of the times because I just get so repulsed, or, you know, my stomach will hurt so bad when I eat. And it's like, you know, I have to do what I have to do because I have to remember how meaningful and how important it is for people like me who like to do small things, how important it is for people like me to be here and to encourage other people to be here. And I just remembered that I have a duty to spread love and encourage other people to be their best selves and to, you know, have hope, because, you know, that was my whole thing, was always being hopeful that the world would get better. And here I am thinking that it won't get better. And so I had to hold myself accountable for, you know, how I was feeling. And so I was like, hey, I need to get up. I need to have some hope. I need to be positive and think that I will get better. And so like a couple weeks ago, I started working out and I've been trying to eat more. And since I got my license, I've been driving and just doing little things to make myself feel better and to help other people feel better, because I'm aware that many of us feel the same way and feel very hopeless, very worthless at this time. And so I try to reach out, try to, you know, reignite some relationships that have fell off because of the pandemic, because a lot of my friends and I haven't been talking as much. But, you know, it's all about perspective. I've found is that if I see my life as worthless or useless, then that's how I'm going to behave. But I had to check myself and like get myself out of bed for once and be like, no, you can't keep doing this to yourself. You need to be motivated. You need to see past this dark cloud above your head, because there's way more to this. And how I asked myself, like, how would I be helping the people around me if I just ended it right now? And it really woke me up and was like, you know, it'd be a selfish thing for you to leave your mom and everyone behind because, you know, you couldn't do it. And if you really needed help, just reach out for the resources. And, you know, I'm deserving of being valued and being here. And so that's just basically how I went about it.
Well, I tell you what, being part of a village, you know, it says it takes the village to raise a child. I think I'm a product of that village because, you know, I had a tough upbringing and not to go into too much details, but it was a tough upbringing for myself, and not having a father myself. I always felt that one day that if I ever became a father, that I would work hard to help train and guide my children to better their lives and do the best they can to serve communities and serve our military, to serve in whatever capacity they wanted, but just to be good quality American citizens. And so when I was able to realize that, I said, one day, I even though I don't have a father, I'm going to be the best father I could be. And so I'm proud to say that I do have 5 children. And my oldest son, Bobby, who you met, Bobby Archuleta, who played football for USC, graduated from USC, and went on to marry and have 3 beautiful children and a wife, and his dream was to come back and teach and coach, and so he's fulfilling that dream. And then I have a daughter who went to Pepperdine, and she graduated from Pepperdine, and she wanted to get into business, and so she's an HR specialist, and so she's doing that and contributing to her community where she lives. And I have another daughter who is a social worker who's out of Chapman College there in Orange County, and she's doing her dream is to work with people in need and as a social worker. And the 2 youngest boys, they both fulfilled their dreams by going to West Point, the United States Military Academy at West Point. So they both did that, and both went on to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're both decorated veterans. And one of them is now at Yale. The youngest is at Yale, getting his master's from Yale, and the other one is still in the service as a major and working in the Pentagon. So they've all done well. To shape their lives, I had to take a good look at my life. And I think to say I didn't have a father, so I didn't know which direction to go, but I knew one thing, that I had to work hard. I had to prepare myself and then understand that as a parent, you have to give so much to your children, and they should always be your priority, your family, your wife, your children, your family, and to give back to them. But what shaped my life and what perception did I have about the community? When I left the service, I felt that as a veteran, I wanted to one day help veterans, and ironically, I was able to do that because I'm a combat veteran. I could talk to some of these combat veterans that may have had PTSD and had issues, and I could look them right in the eye and said, hey, I've been shot at, and I jumped out of airplanes and had to do the things that you did, and so let's talk about it. So I was able to get 2 veterans because I am a veteran, and I realized that maybe that was a calling, and I was able to do that for 22 years, I guess I did doing that. But, I think we have to understand that you have to deal with, what life gives you, and some people are fortunate to have a beautiful family, mom, dad, kids, and the white picket fence, and to be able to do that. And other kids, have a hard time because they come from the other side of the tracks, or they're economically, fighting every day, or they have a language issue, or whatever they might be. They've got to be able to fight and go beyond all that and realize that you can contribute not only to your family, but you can contribute to society by making sure you follow the right path. And the right path is community service. The right path is an education. The right path is planning to do something for your family. And I think that one of the things that strikes me is the fact that because I didn't have a father, I had to rely on coaches and teachers and figures in my life that I could look up to. And whether it was the football coach at my high school, or whether it was at the local park where, we had kids in the neighborhood learning to play baseball and Little League and so on. We had coaches there. So I was able to do that. And, but I have to look back and say that it was a particular teacher that I had in the 7th grade who realized that I came from a tough end of town and I wasn't able to read as well as some of the other kids And so she sat me down and said, every day after school, you're going to come and visit me, and we're going to start you from the first grade and work you all the way up to the seventh grade. And so she did that. And she introduced me to the fact that because I didn't read as well as the other kids, it wasn't that I was dumb and I just didn't have that background. I didn't have that family support. And she was able to see that, you're an intelligent young man, she told me, but, you just haven't got fundamentals. So we're going to go ahead and straighten you out with that. And sure enough, she devoted every day after school for a good number of months. And I caught up, and then I fell in love with reading. I was able then to get into city council and participate in my school, and it was able to open so many doors. And today I seem to read everything I can get my hands on, and I was able to read while I was in the military, and that advanced me. And, I just took that on to my children, and we spent a lot of time in the libraries. And so, there's always a teacher somewhere in your life that propels you to the next level. And I think that seventh grade teacher that I had, she did that for me. So I owe a lot to, the teachers and coaches that were there for me, because, as I said, I had no father to look up to. But I'd like to think that I became that father, and that's why those 5 kids of mine have been able to go do what they have done. So you have to understand that, and I tell this to parents all the time, give your kids the love and attention that they need, give them the time, because that pride of family will carry them through a lifetime.
Humanity has always been growing exponentially. Throughout the centuries, we have experienced drastic rises and falls, booms and busts, plenitude and plague. It was only until the 1800s that humanity numbered a little more than 1 billion people. Now, we are near 8 billion. Mankind is singular in its sense that the growth of civilization is triggered by the growth of each individual, and with each individual's growth being independent and dissimilar to the next, mankind creates the greatest contradiction of all time.
In mankind's near 6,000 years of civilized existence, there have been billions of human beings, each with their own unique experiences, issues, triumphs, and tragedies that have shaped and defined their existence. In a way, we exist as individuals entirely unique, but never truly alone. In that sense, no human experience is perfectly replicable.
Through the vast idiosyncrasies that divide our perceptions of the human experience, we convince ourselves that we are somehow alone in the world, and the lack of uniformity in the human experience, we are each stranded in our own life space, unable to connect with one another, and forced to find intrinsic meaning in aimless debate on cosmic purpose and human nature.
We create fake audiences to underscore the isolation effect of the limelight we put ourselves in. We create a conception of ourselves as being in the center of the universe, act as if everything happening around us either happens for us or because of us. This creates a bubble of isolation, loneliness, and, to some degree, self-indulgence.
There's a lot of words for this effect. Center of the universe syndrome, egoism, narcissism, and then there's the idea of solipsism, which confines knowledge to the mind and the mind only.
According to Merriam-Webster, solipsism is a theory holding that the self can know nothing but its own modifications, and that the self is the only existent thing. From a solipsistic perspective, all things external of one's own body and mind have no foundation in reality. It is an extreme form of subjective idealism that denies that the human mind has any valid ground for believing in the existence of anything but itself. The ideology perpetuates a sense of indifference and attachment to any and all external factors beyond the self. Isolation, too, feeds into the natural egoism of the human experience. As we embrace the feelings of detachment to the world around us, we develop our own worldviews and blind our own perspectives to follow our own established beliefs, We join communities of like-minded individuals for affirmation of our own blindness, and thus we turn a blind eye to the messy, the complicated, and the contradictory issues and circumstances in our own lives. Only through empathy can we explore these vast issues and improve upon ourselves and the community around us.
To quote the Encyclopedia of Social Psychology, empathy is often defined as understanding another person's experience by imagining oneself in that other person's situation. One understands the other person's experience as if it were being experienced by the self, but without the self actually experiencing it. A distinction is maintained between the self and the other.
That's an elaborate way of putting it, but put simply, empathy is being able to walk in another person's shoes. Not in the literal sense, of course, no, but the analogy helps in understanding the concept of empathy. For one, it's easier to empathize with someone when you have similar or shared experiences. To go with our analogy, it's easier to empathize with someone when you have similar shoe sizes. It really helps in understanding their perspective.
Empathy, like all other skills, is learnable. It's formed through acknowledgement of the fact that our lives and our combined human experiences overlap in many crucial and universal ways. But beyond that, it's also about reaching across the boundaries of experience to show compassion and understanding to someone who's going through a completely foreign experience.
In a world so divisive, we as a species thrive off of entropy and disaster. Empathy is the best way to combat the psyche's isolationist tendencies.
So as a therapist, I have to have really good empathy. And so over the years, I've come to learn that empathy is actually a skill. It's a set of skills that we can learn in order to better communicate to other people that we understand their situation, that we understand how they're feeling, which a lot of people mix up with sympathy. So sympathy actually means that I feel exactly what you're feeling. So a lot of people say someone loses a family member. Well, the other family members or friends that lost that person are also sympathizing. So they're in it together. Whereas empathy is actually, you don't have to feel the same way, but you, through skill and language, demonstrate to the other person that you are listening, that you do understand them. And then in my role, it's a little bit unique because my role is to understand where, say, my clients are, and then look around and kind of from their eyes find some solutions to their problems. So that's kind of how I differentiate sympathy from empathy, which a lot of people think are kind of the same thing, but a little bit different. Both including root word from pathos, which means emotion. So it's a Greek word.
So the Empathy Initiative was really what started a lot of that the initial mindset I had of integrating empathy and self-compassion. And what I did was organize those webinar series in February and shared them with some local teams in Orange County, as well as organize some care packages distributed to them to really just help them reflect on that self-care and how we can not only use that empathy for just for sharing with others, but with ourselves, we can use self-compassion and empathy and share it to promote that well-being, that overall well-being that we really need to be able to improve that mental health and create those healthy relationships with our families, especially during this distance learning. I thought it was a great opportunity to really connect as much as I could with all of my peers. And I thought it would be really great to start that.
Yeah, just understanding where people are coming from, listening to them, that's the core root of it, and listening to them, taking them seriously, and then being how can I support this person and how can they support me, and then building a relationship off of that. I think that it's just being able to listen to other people and seeing, because there's no way you can live someone else's experiences. That's not what empathy is trying to be like. I think it's just acknowledging someone else's lived experiences as real and valid, and doing your best to understand them even though you've never been through it yourself.
I always define like sympathy and empathy as different. Like when you're being sympathetic to somebody, like when you go to a funeral, it's like I'm feeling sad just like you're feeling sad. Empathy doesn't mean that I'm going through the same thing as you. It means that I can understand what you're feeling because I have felt it some other different way, or like whatever, just not in this situation, right? So it really makes you sit there and go, huh, it's a different perspective.
Political division has been an extremely prevalent issue you've seen in the past millennia. Whether it be the Ghibellines and the Guelphs, the Kuomintang and the Communists, the Yorks and the Lancasters, our world always seems to be embroiled in political strife. Only recently, with the context of our 2016 election, the COVID-19 epidemic, and of course the subsequent quarantine in the year of 2020, has a new issue emerged: the proliferation of misinformation and the creation of echo chambers.
Echo chambers refer to the circulation of the same perspectives in a subject's life. Search engines and social media platforms tend to tailor their content so as to show what's most pleasing to their audience, and thus, they may find only reflections of their political opinions and their facts of life. Because of this, viewers may be unexposed to other perspectives, or even the other sides of things. A pineapple pizza hater, for instance, may not even consider what a pineapple pizza lover has to say.
In many ways, these echo chambers are dangerous. They reinforce the idea of black and white morality, that the subject is correct and the other side is not. Oftentimes, the situation is far more complex and nuanced. The empathy is the key to reshaping our minds into something more unifying and compassionate.
Empathy is a long-term solution to division. It's hard to hate someone whose shoes you've walked around in.
Ultimately, empathy is simply tolerance. It's a way of living that accepts everything except intolerance. It's a compassionate approach to daily living that emphasizes connectivity, community, respect, and love. It's the idea that every person's problems are unique, but not alone.
Empathy is about more than just the idea of live and let live. It's about actively empowering those of us in society that are disadvantaged. It's about embracing the uniqueness of each individual and recognizing that self-worth is not quantifiable but inherent in all of us.
Whether it be the cold, dark flashes of a computer screen, the exposed and isolated edge at the lunch table, or the stench of mothballs and decay in the community home, loneliness seems to follow us in our day-to-day lives. Born from our primordial need for protection and safety in numbers, the feeling of solitude and its accompanying dissatisfaction seems to permeate our modern reality. Already, the vast majority of Americans have succumbed to this sense of isolation. In 2020, Cigna Healthcare discovered that more than 3/5 of Americans report feeling lonely and poorly understood, a vast increase of 13% from a report 2 years prior. With deep-rooted connections to mental and physical health problems such as depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, poor health habits, and more, we struggle to cross the hurdles of mental illness our society has been creating. Now, under the shroud of quarantine, approximately 80% of young adults aged 18 to 35 have begun displaying significant depressive symptoms. Looking around the world, one can't help but notice the burgeoning mental health crisis as members of the global community struggle to make ends meet and cope with the new remote way of life.
I definitely lost 2 years of college, which is, I mean, it's better than I guess losing 2 years of high school or anything. But it was yeah, because for me it was, I entered college as a sophomore standing since I had enough units. So I'll be graduating in 3 years instead of 4, and a year and a half got eaten up by the pandemic, which is, I mean, of course, it was what had to be done. But that's one thing I really feel like I've lost. Like I think I've lost a lot of chance to be independent as much as I can. I moved away for college to a new city, and I think living there by myself with no people that I knew before I moved was really, it was really like life changing for me as a person. so I lost those years of college.
So the previous question touched on the pandemic. I think the pandemic is a good question. I mean, is a good point of reference. So what's government doing well over the course of the pandemic, and it's been going on for now over a year, and this has been kind of unexplored territory, biggest kind of most severe public health emergency in our lifetimes. It's unprecedented. And I think the good thing, and government has actually has done some good in reminding people that there are certain things that can only be effectively addressed through collective and collaborative effort, where we as individuals, we as members of a community, invest in our systems of government, particularly the public health system, to protect us in this case from the novel coronavirus, something for which we as humans were completely unprepared with no immunity. And this has been challenging. So on the good side, I think in many cases during the pandemic, the government has been effective in kind of rallying people, creating a consciousness and kind of a consensus as to the necessity of collective action, collective precautions. Using the pandemic also as an example, what have we not done well? It hasn't always been consistent. It hasn't always been effective. We have had moments, in fact, many moments over the course of the pandemic where government probably has failed to be clear and articulate about what we're trying to achieve and the reasons we need to do certain things. And even within that, we've had lapses of leadership where public figures have either acted overly ideologically or sometimes, lapsed in their own kind of personal adherence to the same rules that they would have others follow. And that compromises their effectiveness and probably perpetuates some of the cynicism and suspicion that is so common among folks who, otherwise don't trust government and aren't inclined to participate in these sorts of collective.
The challenges and difficulties expressed by people throughout the nation are unique, while not alone in their qualities, setting, and situation. Around the world, hundreds of millions of people experience similarly unique obstacles to their life. United through their shared experiences of pain and toil, the world exists within a global community. But what is a community? What does it consist of? Why should we pursue it?
I feel like I didn't really know what a community was until I went to college and I was like completely on my own. I had no idea like who my friends were and all that. But I found a really solid group of people, like several groups of people that I felt really safe in. One of them was the Asian Pacific Islander community at my university. I go to a predominantly white institution, which is like a very new experience for me. I grew up in public schools, so going to a school that was 60% white was really shocking to me. So I really found solidarity with other Filipino students there. It's kind of like you have that automatic feeling like, oh, that's my homie, just because like you look the same and like you grew up the same, like your parents speak the same language and all that. So it doesn't have to be cultural, but I think like community is about like shared experiences and values. Some of those experiences can be like positive or even like have like traumatic roots in them. I know a lot of like cultural communities have like histories of like really traumatic histories that kind of like bond them together, and that's what like keeps them together. But like in a lighter note, like I think communities, you can choose your own communities. It's like whatever makes you feel safe and whatever makes you feel happy, and whoever that may be, or like whatever, like where it may be too.
There's all different types of communities, right? So any grouping of humans that makes what do they say, the sum is greater than the parts? What's that saying? Where when you're contributing to something bigger than yourself, to me, and I didn't by all means not a dictionary definition, but I think about like how, oh, I can't drive my car as fast as I would like to because I want everyone to be safe, right? That's community. Like you're giving up something ultimately, but it's for a greater good. And that's community. I also think like with chosen communities that maybe there's a component that nourishes you in some way, right? Maybe even not just chosen communities, like I get to live here, right? That nourishes me. Or like a community of like writers I belong to, like it nourishes my soul. Like, and so I give to that community because I am ultimately taking something away that's valuable to me too.
Communities are a unified body of individuals, usually containing a diverse array of standards and methods of organization. They are unified and based on common interests, characteristics, histories, or experiences. Whether it be a cheese appreciation society, an ethnic community, or a gargantuan extended family, communities are the bonds that ground us to humanity. As groups defined by a single unifying characteristics, communities play a crucial role in our development as individuals. By embracing and identifying with a community, we take up their values and meld ourselves into unique individuals. Through these adopted traits, we develop vertical and horizontal layers to our interests, passions, and personalities that enrich who we are as a whole.
In other words, we discover new depths in our own existing interests and even entirely new passions that allow us to enrich our own personalities and quirks. And in the process, that makes us much more intriguing and intellectually satisfied.
One thing that I see as a passion is something that deeply motivates you and that you're completely driven by, whether it could be creatively or emotionally. Just a passion is something that you're deeply indulged in, that you deeply respect, find entertainment from. It's just wonderful piece of motivation. But what leads to them, that could be a wide variety of things. It could be something you saw on TV once, and let's say your passion is now for editing, or you could have listened to a piece of music, now you want to be a musician. Like, there's inspiration in everything, and no two people are going to have the exact same inspiration or stories. So passions can be formed from anything, and they just lead to beautiful creations, and that it's very different for everyone. My first exposure to my passion, which is music, was from a very young age. Both of my parents were musicians. Mom played piano and the bass. My dad played percussion and drums and all that. And so I grew up in a musical household, hearing them make music, and that led to me being who I am today. And that just my passion for music and just my want to create has just driven me through school, through life, just through everything, to just try and follow my passion and follow my dreams and do whatever I can to achieve them.
Communities don't just supplement our distinctive quirks and qualities, however. In tandem with mankind's natural desire for socialization and camaraderie, communities serve as a vital breeding ground for discussion, understanding, and solace from the wears and tears of the world. In family, we expect to find support and affection from those who have known and cared for us since the very beginning. In hobbyist organizations, we expect to find friends and company united by sheer passion and adoration for the various forms of arts. In identity groups, we expect to find mutual respect and understanding for the defining portions of our identity. So by discovering new communities and organizations, we discover new meanings and new perspectives on the lives we live and comfort for the troubles we encounter. This is the importance of empathy and understanding. If communities are established based on a mutual understanding, trait, or commonality, then empathy is the bridge between communities that allow disparate individuals to find similarities and understanding between each other. It's what admits novice musicians into more advanced bands and orchestras. It's what invites outsiders to explore the depth and intricacies of new cultures and movements. It's the beating heart of a community that brings in new blood and forges stronger bonds between its members. By empathetically embracing the fact that meaning and purpose in life is uniquely tailored to the experiences, triumphs, and tragedies that mold every clade and class of humanity, we take the first step in giving back to the community. In the process, we ground ourselves through their concerns, fears, and ambitions, and find comfort that even though we are uniquely individual, we are not alone. Adopting a newfound sense of dedication to empathy and respect for our peers within the community is only the first step towards making a difference. And just like everything in life, communities require time, effort, and sacrifice.
Obviously, I have the privilege of serving in the state senate of the California, the largest state in the United States, and 40 million people, over 400 cities, over 1,000 school districts, 58 counties. And I serve one of 40 state senate districts and over 1 million people. There's only 40 state senators for 40 million people. And so as you'd expect, a lot of pressures can be brought to bear over the course of that work as we vote on various things that have an impact on either special interests or communities. And so the quandary is, how to, sort of apply my best judgment and play a productive role in that against the constant pressure to, mollify special interest groups, or probably just importantly sometimes to kind of hew the course set by my caucus, right? I'm a member of the Democratic Party, so the large majority of Democrats, and so there tends to be kind of a consensus as to what my party, what my colleagues in the party think is the right thing to do, and I don't always necessarily agree with those prescriptions. So it creates a tension on kind of my vote versus what's expected, my participation in debate or against what's kind of assumed. And then I guess another tension similarly is the tension between representing my constituents, right? And I represent a part of the state that's kind of interesting because it's kind of in the middle, right? These 16 cities in the 29th Senate District and Orange County, a little bit of LA County and San Bernardino County. And so I have constituents, I have cities that have, very distinct kind of political points of view. And sometimes I will have a very different point of view, especially when it comes to kind of votes about social justice issues or public safety issues. So there is that tension sometimes between, sort of adhering to what are clearly the wishes of my constituents or certain of my constituents, and then sometimes otherwise voting my conscience or my values. It is a fact. It's unfortunate that we're living in a time where there is a level of division that's probably not the worst it's been in American history, but it's certainly not. It's worse than it has been in recent years. And so, what's the best way to promote understanding and compassion within that environment? Education is very important. Access, which is to say, encouraging participation among all different groups, so they are exposed to ideas and participate in those conversations at whatever level, and have the insight that their neighbors may not agree with them, may have different politics, but are equally good people or equally invested in a California that works for everyone. And so throughout that, I think we have to figure out ways, particularly in government, how to remind people of the delicate balance between your individual interest, what you might want, what your in-group might want, and the greater collective good, because these two things aren't always exactly the same. And that's kind of the genius of the American system throughout history, was we've generally been able to find that balance where we've honored individual liberty, the pursuit of happiness, as our founding documents say, but we've also been good about engaging and enrolling people into sort of greater efforts toward the common good. Sometimes that entails sacrifice, sometimes that entails sublimating your own individual interest to the community, and we have gotten away from that a little bit, and I think it's important to remind ourselves that community is very important. Obviously, all of these play very important roles, and I would add to that the need for ethical leadership to generate consensus, to engage people, to adhere to those values and to model those values as an elected representative, even if it sometimes comes at the expense of leverage of your personal interest or the block to which you belong, because we're all part of a greater social whole. And again, in the U.S., we celebrate the individual, but the only reason we're able to do that is because we are so prosperous, and our democracy historically has been so stable.
To serve and represent is a calling, I believe. And as you serve and represent your school, and so many of your fellow students serve and represent your school, whether it's on the basketball team, football team, would it be on this, in student government, whatever you do in the school, you are doing what I do. You represent an entity that you believe in, that you're part of, and you always want to make better. And I think that's what has led me to serve and represent the 32nd Senate District. As I mentioned earlier, it's 1 million people that of all walks of life. And as a veteran who've served as a former paratrooper with the elite 82nd Airborne, I'm proud to say that. So as a paratrooper, I was able to serve my country in that capacity. And then later in my lifetime, I was able to serve in the Montebello Police Department and all aspects of that, and finished up in the detective unit. And then later on, I became during this time, I became Commissioner of Military and Veterans Affairs for the County of Los Angeles. Did that for a good number of years, and serving and representing veterans and making sure that they were able to get into the hospitals, receive their benefits and medical treatment. And so speaking on behalf of veterans, doing that, and that propelled me to get into the city council race, and was able to do that, and then later become a mayor of the city, and then eventually run for the state senate. What gives me the sense and the conviction to serve, I think just wanting to make things better. And I think so many of your students are doing that every single day, wanting to make your school better, wanting to get a better education, wanting to represent your communities yourselves. But I think that serving your community is such an honor. But as I wanted to have veterans get better representation, I wanted to have veterans be recognized, as I wanted people to understand what the plight of the veterans, whether they be homeless veterans or they be veterans who have served with honor and distinction, that they need to be recognized just by saying hello to a veteran, good morning to a veteran, running down the street and saying hello to your neighbor who's a veteran. These are things that we need to do, but there's so many veterans that need help right now, and I was part of that, to be able to serve and represent them for so many years that I've made so many friends and friends within organizations, veterans organizations. I've done that, and here in Sacramento, I've been acknowledged by various veterans organizations as the legislator of the year, who's handled veterans issues here. And I'm continuing to serve the veterans. I'm the chairman of the Military and Veterans Committee that works with our veterans, the National Guard, the reserves here in California. And we oversee and participate with the Department of Veterans Affairs, CalVet it's called, to make sure that our veterans' homes are well stocked, and we have good medical staff there and professionals that serve and help our veterans. So I'm still doing that to a degree, but I do a lot of other things to help the community. And I think that if I turn the clock back, to be able to be just everyday Joe citizen that realizes that, hey, why can't we have better parks, cleaner streets? Why can't we make sure that we have the best security with our law enforcement? Why can't we have the best infrastructure, bridges and streets, and just better services? So wanting to make sure that my community was going to receive its piece of the pie, I wanted to make sure that the best way to do that is to get involved in the community, and being either a commissioner serving for Parks and Rec or traffic and safety, or being a city council member, I knew that would be the way to help my community and help so many people, seniors and kids in schools, and work with the school districts and the school employees and work with the environment. You know, the different entities to protect our water and to make sure that our environment was clean, the clean air. And now everybody's going into thinking about zero emissions, electricity, electric cars, hydrogen. You know, so many things we can do in the future to clean our air and give us a better environment for your students and students behind you. And we want to do that and have a good, clean California. So I'm able to do that, and I think it was just a sense of duty that I felt when I served in the military and got out, and I just wanted to continue doing that. And that, while I said to some, it's a calling, but you know, there's no greater honor but to serve and represent another human being, and to make sure that in some cases are well fed, well housed, and not forgotten. And this is what we try to do. So when we talk about so many people in need, whether it's the homeless, the veterans, whether it be kids in school, having programs to make sure that kids can read and write properly and are competitive when they come out of school, like yourselves, in front of your classmates that are seniors that are going to go on to colleges, to make sure that right now that we start thinking about helping them not to be faced with a debt when they come out of college, and making things reasonable, to be able to get a good college education within the California state system, that maybe you can get out with being debt free, and to make sure there's scholarships out there that help kids. And you know, community involvement, from keeping our streets safe, our shopping centers, getting people back to work, opening up these businesses that have been hurt. There's just so many things that we can do, and that's all part of community service. And I'm so.
Well, it's probably easier for me to talk about my clients because that's my job. That's what they pay me for. That's what I do for a living. And what I love to do is help people and help them feel like they have a safe place to be able to discover their own experience, how they feel, how their thinking gets in the way of their life, their goals. So supporting them, one, we create a safe space, we talk it out, we normalize it, we acknowledge the feelings of loneliness, the isolation that's happened, and then we also problem solve. We create solutions. We learn skills. So I teach some of them how to do, some meditation or breathing exercises. We look at the quality of all the areas of life, and figure out where we want to set some goals.
Of course, not everyone is a leading politician guiding society's future, an activist able to create and influence the changing currents of public perception, or a well-educated psychologist. While we may not all be influential, powerful, intellectual, or particularly eloquent, the very foundations of community involvement are built on simple acts of kindness and compassion from the people around. It's positivity, encouragement, and honesty. It's about listening.
Western culture is very much like, you're on your own, good luck. People are probably worse off from you, so you should be happy with where you are, but keep working. And I feel like, in my opinion, that's not how life should be. Life should be very constructive and very collaborative, and working towards everyone bettering themselves rather than like trying to just move from place to place in our life. It should be like, I can rely on this person. I should be feeling at peace right now. They can count on me for so-and-so. But yeah, not just doing things for our personal benefit, but because like we genuinely care about others. And I think that's what a lot of communities now are really lacking, like just the genuine care for others, and like that's showing through actions. Because I feel like sometimes it's common, people do things out of their own personal benefit, which is understandable, but really pushing that, yes, you can do things for other people and not seek anything out of it other than genuine care,
I think it's bringing positivity to my students. Being a teenager is one of the hardest times in a person's life in the best of circumstances. And so really during this last year, but really any year, try to be composed. And I don't always succeed at that, but be composed, be positive, be caring, be forgiving, be flexible. To err is human and to forgive is divine. And I think for people's mental health, it's okay. It's okay how you feel. It's okay how you acted. We're going to get through what you did or what you didn't do. And the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and we're going to be better people for it, whether we learn from our successes or, we really learn a lot more from our mistakes.
I do think you have to enter into the conversations knowing that there are people who aren't as compassionate or who don't understand the nuance of a situation, and be patient with them. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's almost easier because we're with children a lot. So you can have this expectation of okay, there's hope. They're young. They're going to keep learning. This is where they're at today. It's a lot harder to have that conversation with an adult because I'm they're still here. They're at this is where they're at. It's a lot harder to give them what I like to call the softer side of Stuart, but if you give up on people, then it's all over. If you let the conversation end where that person is never going to listen to another side again, it's over. You've lost, you have to understand that this conversation is going to be going on. And I'm talking about the conversations I have, tend to center around equity. Just that's kind of a passion of mine, right? But many of the conversations that I'm having are going to go on after I'm gone, right? They're still going to go on long after we're all gone. And we just have to hope that we're keeping the conversation going.
As much as I don't want to give people with bigoted ideas and thoughts and passions to have a platform to speak, I think just after sitting down with people like that, I have, in college you meet a lot of different people from a lot of different, parts of the political spectrum. After you sit down and actually talk to them, you realize the information that they've been given, the way that they've seen things is almost justified. There's so much misinformation out there. I'm not saying being racist or sexist or homophobic is justified. I just want to make sure that I'm not saying that at all. It's not justified. But the way they interpret that information with the bias that's already given with that those statistics that they use to make their points, those are already they're steered in a way to make you reach a certain conclusion. So I feel just explaining to someone, showing them facts, and I guess explaining to them how certain nuances, especially giving voices to those in marginalized communities, since they've been silenced for so long, they should be the ones to speak for themselves instead of someone who's a performative activist speaking for other groups. I feel they should, I guess, they don't have to. I shouldn't say should. They can speak for these issues and inform people with this skewed mindset to change the way they look at things.
As a teacher, and I've been doing this for 18 years, I used to work in areas where there was extreme amounts of poverty, big time gang affiliations, that type of thing. And kindness goes a long way there, because it's not normal, and there's not there's that kind of this trust thing, so they have a belief that respect is something that's earned, right? And fear is respect. And when you don't operate that way and they start to feel safe, it's something that can change somebody.
I just like to say, if you know better, then you do better. Each one teach one, come together. I saw that in a Netflix show and it just stuck with me. If you know better, you will do better. And I kind of remember that in the case that some people don't know better, so they don't do better. And then it's my job to each one teach one, come together. So I need to teach each other and come together with my community and prioritize educating each other, because as much as I think it may be common sense to me, to other people it's not common sense. Other people are not fortunate enough to be educated maybe in the way that I am, even though I don't think that I'm all that educated, but some people just don't have access to the same resources that I have, or weren't able to understand my point of view because they live differently. So I try to implement that as best as I can, and it keeps me from deviating and doing bad things, because I understand, like, if I know better, then I should do better, and I will do better. So that's kind of what I go about. I know a lot of other people have deeper, philosophies that they go by, but I feel like keeping it simple, because then, that simple phrase in itself is very easily expandable and can be, adjusted to everyone, so that's just how I keep it.
We live in a community far more divided than ever before. Whether it be opinions of politics, faith, science, or culture, conflict has become a prevalent issue dominating every aspect of society. In the spirit of self-indulgence, we've embraced philosophies and political theories as universal fact. Where we were once united in mutual respect and courtesy, we find ourselves now embracing tribalism and division, leaving millions lost and alone in the wake. There is no such thing as a universal truth to life and meaning. Through the vast array of human existence, these abstract interpretations have taken up unique and transmutational qualities. Meaning is what we make it. Only by embracing the qualities of patience, tolerance, and understanding can we grow to understand the different universal truths and find comfort in the communities around us.